Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I first put on record my admiration for councils, councillors and officers right across the country for the very fine work they do, and that work often carried out at the most challenging times against a backdrop of real financial pressures on those local authorities, not least in terms of the rising demand for adult social care, special educational needs, temporary accommodation and others. I don't think there was ever a time when we appreciated councils more than during the COVID crisis. We saw the fine work they did at that point in time and how important it is to have those councillors and councillors helping local people, and indeed to the cost of living crisis also. So can I welcome the extra money provided by this spending review, 6.8% in core spending power increase. I also welcome the approach that the Minister is intending to take in terms of multi-year settlement. I think that's a sensible way forward. And also, I can put on record my respect and admiration for the Minister himself. He always takes a very considered and responsible approach to this, and he has huge knowledge in this particular sector. And I promise him we'll work cross-party wherever we can in terms of the things we do agree on to try and make it easier for local councils to do the fine work that they do. Would the Minister accept, though, that the reality is that the majority of the extra monies that are provided through this settlement are raised through council tax increases, which are effectively taxes on local taxpayers, of course, working people? And does he regret, because he is sensible and considered, as I say, the fact that the Prime Minister stood on a stage in Swindon on the 30th of March 2023 with the Deputy Prime Minister, his Secretary of State, stating that he would freeze council tax for the first year they were in government? And that has not been the case. He promised quite clearly a tax cut for the 99% for working people who are facing a rise in their council tax. Those were his words. And his words were also there would be not one penny on your council tax, what he actually said. We said then that these promises were not worth the paper they are written on, and how right we were. Under Labour, typical council tax bills are to rise by 5% in April 2025, another increased tax on working people. This means that the average household faces an above-inflation increase of around £100 to their council tax bills in that year. It's all this we will do, in many cases, is fill the black hole in council finances that Labour are creating due to an increase in the national insurance contributions. Furthermore, it is quite clear that Labour are deliberately funding largely Labour-led urban areas at the expense of rural areas. The reality is rural areas will face higher council tax increases to make up for reduced central funding, despite the increases in cost of providing for services in rural areas. To give the House an easy example of this, my local authority, North Yorkshire Council, spend more on school transport than they do on the whole of children's social care. That's the cost of delivering services in rural areas. Despite this, the Labour government has chosen to scrap the Rural Services Delivery Grant. They have said that they are repurposing it. However, it's now clear that it's not being repurposed in a way that supports rural areas in the way the delivery grant used to do, and despite, again, costs being higher there to deliver services. The Chairman of the County Council's network has warned that rural areas will lose hundreds of millions of pounds due to Labour's prioritisation of urban areas over rural ones in the way funds are being distributed, moving away in distribution away from a needs-based formula to one based on deprivation. The Chair, Councillor Tim Oliver, has warned that Labour's funding formula will mean that rural councils would lose an estimated £190 million in a single year. He's also stated that when taking into account the monies needed to cover the cost of the national insurance increases, this is the worst settlement for county councils in 4 years.